After several months of riding and 2 dedicated videos, you still have a lot of questions about this bike. I tried to cover everything in the last 2 videos, but apparently I missed a few things. I went through all your questions both here on YouTube, as well as comments and DMs on Instagram, and I compiled a list of everything that you still wanted to know. So let's get started. One of the most common questions I get regarding this bike is about the size. I'm not going to suggest that you choose a certain size, but hopefully my explanation will help you make the right choice. I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters, and I ride a size large. The reach feels just right, and the standover height is perfect for me. The size large came with a 170mm dropper, and I could probably get away with a 190. Between now and when I first ordered this bike, Commencal made some changes to their size chart. At the time, I fell between a size medium and a size large. But according to their chart today, I should be on a medium. I wouldn't say that I agree with this, because I'm very happy that I'm on a size large, and I wouldn't change it if I had the option. If this bike came as a 29er, I might think otherwise, but as it is, I feel right at home on a large. I ordered this bike on June 29th of 2020, which was the first day that the bike was available for pre-order. At the time, it wasn't supposed to deliver until sometime in August, which was about 2 months after pre-ordering. It only took about 3 weeks for the bike to actually deliver, and I've been riding it ever since. It looks like that if you order the bike today, it won't deliver until sometime in April of 2021. In my case, it delivered much faster than that, but I wouldn't assume the same thing would happen right now. I would go based off of what their estimates are on their website. Well, it's not the lightest bike out there. The average weight of an enduro bike is somewhere between 30 and 35 pounds. That's usually dependent on both the frame size and the components that come on the bike. As it sits right now, this bike weighs right around 37.5 pounds. And again, I ride a size large, so the weight of your bike may vary depending on what frame size you get. The only changes I've made that may impact the bike's weight is adding a chain guide and bash guard, Crank Brothers stamped 2 pedals, switching to a tubeless tire setup, and swapping out the stock grips for some P&W loam grips. Prior to any changes that I made, this bike weighed just over 35 pounds right out of the box. For being more on the heavy side, I wouldn't say that it feels that way while out riding. Even when considering just how big this bike is with all of its travel, it's still very playful and can be tossed around relatively easily. I actually have not. I will play around with it this spring, but until I can establish my own opinion, I've left a link to an article down in the description that provides some great info on the different settings. But something that I can answer for you. I broke the stock Shimano SLX derailleur while riding on a pretty techy trail up in Copper Harbor.
Oh, that did not sound good. No!
I slipped on a rock, heard a loud crunch, and that was the end of that.
Come on.
I wouldn't say it's an upgrade, but I switched to the SRAM NX derailleur and shifter simply because that's what the bike shop had in stock. On the same trip, I also ripped the rear tire off my wheel while taking a turn a little too hard. But that one was on me. As I mentioned earlier, I changed out the grips, swapped rubber for juice, threw on a bash guard and chain guide combo, and added a set of stamped 2 pedals. But something I didn't mention was the addition of the all-mountain style frame protection kit. I'm not too worried about the little scuffs and scratches that come with riding a mountain bike, but I tend to rub my heels on the rear triangle when I ride, and I wanted to add some burly armor to help protect the paint a little bit. And while we're on the subject of modifications, it's something I've absolutely considered. I don't know that I've heard a bad thing about them, and it's something that I would like to try at some point. The last time we talked about this shock, I surprised a lot of you because I said I was running about a 15% sag. That was only because I hadn't added any volume spacers and I was bottoming out a lot on the trip that we were on. Don't worry, it's not my usual setting. Believe it or not, on the bottom side of the down tube, there are 2 bolts that hold the frame protector in place that actually double as a bottle cage mount. It's not the most ideal mounting location because as you can see, it gets covered in mud. But hey, it's better than nothing. I don't personally use a water bottle because I tend to prefer a hydration pack, but I have mounted a trail pump and a spare tube there when going on shorter rides. I might play around with the new setup this riding season, but until then, it's cage free. For such a big bike with so much travel, this bike climbs a lot better than I would have expected. This is in part to the lockouts on the suspension, the huge gear range out back, a nice steep seat tube angle, and overall comfortable riding position. I'm not going to pretend that this is some amazing bike for going uphill, because let's face it, climbing sucks no matter what bike you're on. This thing's meant to be pointed downhill, but get you back up to the top again for another lap afterwards. So we just went over how this bike both pedals and climbs, but what you really want to know is how this thing descends. This thing flies through the air with ease and eats up any sort of technical descending you could throw at it. Everything from jumps to flow to tech trails, this thing handles it all just fine. No, I'm not going as fast as some of you might be going on those trails, and I'm definitely not jumping as far, but everything that I've thrown at it, it's handled just fine. In my opinion, it probably exceeds the most with tech trails, and that's largely due to the huge Fox 38 up front.
Oh, I'm getting tired.
Between this fork and the Float X2 out back, both of your wheels will be firmly planted at all times. This thing handles jumps just as well, and with such a low bottom bracket, you can come in as fast as you want to any lip, and you'll be perfectly comfortable. A lot of you want to know how this bike handles more of the everyday kind of trails. Things like XC, tighter pedally trails, and even fire roads. Don't those trails eat up the travel and make it more challenging? Well, yes and no. Where I live, there isn't much for elevation. Most of our trails are hand-cut single track with tight turns and even tighter gaps between the trees. You're almost always pedaling, and calling something a descent around here is almost laughable. Fortunately, the suspension can be locked out for these kinds of rides. For my local trails, I usually ride with the shock in the firm setting and the fork somewhere in the middle. The Fox 38 can truly be locked out, but I only use that for road rides. We'll get back to that. Having a longer bike with a slack front end makes navigating tight trails a little challenging, but it's not that bad. You get used to the slightly wider turning radius and guiding your wide bars through tighter sections of the trail. But all the extra suspension really isn't that noticeable. This bike keeps you nice and centered on your bike, so your weight is pretty evenly suspended between the fork and the shock. I'm not at all saying it's ideal as an XC hardtail in this situation. I'm just saying it's not as bad as you might think. I knew that I was buying a bike with too much travel for my local trails, but it makes the trails that I like riding that much more enjoyable. I live about 5 miles from 2 different trail systems, and rather than loading up my bike and driving to the trailheads, I pedal to the trails on a regular basis. When putting the shock into the stiffer setting and fully locking out the fork, this thing pedals like a dream. It's obviously not intended for road rides, but it does the trick when you need it to. If you are someone who is wondering if this bike is too much for where you ride, just know that I was in your same shoes when I was placing my order. There's a good chance that it is too much bike for your local trails, but it's perfect for those bike trips and park days. Hopefully this video answered any questions that you still had about the 2021 Clash Essential. Between this and my previous 2 videos, we should have covered just about everything. But if there's something that I missed, let me know down in the comments, and I'll try my best to help you out. If you haven't already, check out my previous 2 videos about this bike. And if you like what you see, make sure that you subscribe.